Good day, Toronto. Welcome to the first ever interview on the PrimePropertiesTO channel. I have Beta Delisi here from Stonegate Legal.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. So I thought because of all the things that are going on right now with the coronavirus and COVID-19, that I'm going to bring on a professional who has a lot of experience. And I'm going to let Beta you explain kind of where your background is on what's happening in the landlord and the tenant field right now, because a lot of things are changing.
Excellent, excellent. So, I'll keep a long story short. I'll keep my long biography short. I come from a real estate background, and then my path in real estate had led me to property management, and my over the years of acquiring small to medium sized landlords who are acquiring small to medium sized properties,
Mm-hmm.
um, I it, I became a paralegal, and now I can legally represent my landlord clients at the board. So, although my background lies in real estate, I don't practice real estate anymore. I'm a full-time paralegal. We do understand that, around the COVID-19, there's a lot of uncertainties. There's a lot of questions that my office is being bombarded with, both by realtors, landlords, and investors,
Mm-hmm.
especially regarding rents. So I'm glad that Zen invited me on his show to help address some of these concerns.
Well, I just want to appreciate your time because I know how busy you are right now with all the people that's calling you. And just for all of you guys who are out there, this is actually our second round at this because the internet failed us the first time. So we're trying to get this. This is how critical we think this information is for all of you guys to hear. Okay. So I
It's
think the first thing that's most important that I know you're getting asked a lot, that I'm getting asked a lot of is, do you still have to pay rent right now?
Okay, drum roll. And yes, okay, so tenants cannot withhold rent because of what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they cannot stop paying rent. The Residential Tenancies Act, which is this guy right here,
I love how you have a stack of that on your
right?
desk.
You see how thick it is?
And look how small the font is.
Yes. There we go. Just open it so you can see how small it is,
Yeah, it's like
right?
an encyclopedia.
So this is the Residential Tenancies Act, right? So this is the law that covers residential tenancies.
Yeah,
And in this book, it says that the tenant cannot withhold rent for any reason, not for maintenance and repairs, not because the landlord is harassing them, and especially not because we have a pandemic. Rent must be paid. The RTA, the Residential Tenancies Act, says rent is due and payable on the first of the month.
hmm,
It also says that rent is considered late if it is not paid on or before the day that it's due.
yeah,
Okay. If a tenant does not pay the rent on or before the day it is due, the landlord has the right to give and serve the tenant an N4 notice to terminate tenancy for non-payment of rent the day after the rent was due.
yeah. And
Okay.
I know we need to kind of explain what the N4 form is for those of us who are not familiar with the process of eviction.
Absolutely. So the N4 form. So let's start off and say lawyers, sorry, realtors,
Yes,
and anybody else other than a landlord and their legal rep cannot fill out and serve an N4 notice to terminate tenancy.
correct.
Cannot do that on behalf of your tenants. You're not doing your tenants any justice. So, what is a notice to terminate tenancy? A notice to terminate a notice to terminate tenancy, the N4 form, uh, informs the tenant that they have 14 days to pay all the arrears that they owe, or
Hmm.
they have to move out of the rental unit. So they have the option of one or the other. In order for them to void that N4 and to remain in the rental unit, they have to pay all the arrears that they owe within the 14-day period. If they do not, and if after the 14-day period they remain in possession of the rental unit, the landlord has the right to file the N4 with the landlord and tenant board and obtain a hearing date. So
Hmm.
the landlord has the right to still, even during this COVID-19 pandemic, to serve notices onto their tenants. They have the right to do that.
Okay, and we can go into why it's very critical to serve the N4 because, and I'll let you explain this. Like after you serve the N4, it doesn't mean that the tenant will leave. There's actually a couple steps afterwards before they can legally ask the tenant to leave the property.
That's right. So there's a lot of steps after that. Uh, but
I'm simplifying it for you.
you're simplifying. So just because the landlord serves an N4 doesn't mean the tenant is going to get evicted. The
Hmm.
notices are aggressively written so that the tenant can pay the rent back.
Hmm.
Okay? That's why the N4 is structured. That's how it's structured. Now, if the tenant doesn't pay, at least the landlord has started legal proceedings. It is the landlord has the right to start legal proceedings because even right now, tenants are misinformed in the sense that, we're going to be addressing mortgage deferrals later on in
Yep.
our conversation. But now with all the rumors and around mortgage deferrals, tenants think that, oh, the landlord can get a deferral on its mortgage. Why do I have to pay the rent?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So these are all things that the landlord needs to take into consideration when or if they decide to serve the N4.
Okay. So let me ask you a question that some of my clients and people have asking you. What is this force majeure clause and is it applicable? This is like the act of God. Can they use this as a defense for saying, I'm not going to pay rent?
Unfortunately, not.
Hmm.
Definitely not. Okay. Now, if it goes to the board, when the board opens, when the board resumes business as usual, this may be a reason to delay an eviction, but
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that the tenant will be given a forgiveness.
Hmm.
Right? An act of God, unfortunately, doesn't stop mortgage payments, doesn't stop ongoing, non-stopping expenses such as property taxes. Even if the landlord's property is fully mortgage-free and paid off, there are, property taxes are never is never ending, and
Nope.
some landlords have to pay the utilities. So
Yeah.
these are expenses that the landlord is incurring.
Yeah. So I think anyone who's a landlord and investor right now, it's very critical that you heed Mita's advice to file the N4 right away. The
Serve the N4.
Oh, sorry, serve the N4. I'm sorry. Yeah. And this is important because it's not that you are going to be mean to your client slash tenant. What it is you need to get the paper trail started so that if it does go further, at least you got a head start on it because
Absolutely.
the eviction process, if you're in Toronto, could take anywhere between 4 to 6 months
Easily.
easily. And
And
that means 4 to 6 months, no rent in your pocket and you're paying out of pocket.
that's right. And that is if the tenant doesn't put a hold on it, if they don't put a stay on it, if they don't want to go back to the board because they think there was an error in law or an error in fact. I mean, I've seen evictions that, simple evictions that we received an order within 6 months, but the tenant was not evicted till after a year because they've put a stay on it, or they've gone to the divisional court and they've requested a stay on it. Like
Yeah.
the landlord has to start the legal proceedings so that they do have a head start.
Yeah, because like the worst case scenario is you don't get rent, then you're paying double mortgage if you own your property as well. Then that means if you don't pay it, the banks can come after you for your property and foreclosures, which means you lose your investment property. So this is why it's very critical and why I wanted to have Beta on the show to kind of hammer this home.
Absolutely. The payments don't stop, right?
Yes, exactly. So here's another question that's very common right now. Can your tenant, so say my tenant is asking me to use the last month's rent to cover their rent payment because they don't have it right now?
Okay, so I would say no. Okay,
Hmm.
that's a terrible idea, and I'll tell you why. Okay, the landlord can only collect a deposit in the amount of the first month's rent deposit to be held as the last month's rent deposit
Hmm.
prior to entering into a tenancy agreement. Okay,
Yep.
the deposit cannot be for more than the rent amount, the 1 month's rent amount. And
Yeah.
it cannot be used for anything except for the last month's rent. And the reason for that is because, if the landlord agrees to put the last month's rent towards, let's say, for example, the month of April, and
Hmm.
if they have a tenant who's very savvy on how they can maneuver around the Residential Tenancies Act, in the future, come time for that tenant to move out, they can play around with the landlord and actually obtain 1 or 2 months of free rent, or to avoid paying rent for those 2 months,
Hmm.
which we want to avoid, right? Last month's rent should only be used towards last month's rent. We're going to talk about relief options, but this is not a recommended form of relief.
Yeah. So kind of the overall message is, despite what's happening right now, we still have to follow the landlord tenant kind of agreement, sorry, the LTA right now to kind of see what's going on. And if we are to make some kind of concessions for our tenants, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So don't use any of the ideas that, a lot of people are asking us about right now, because they just don't sound like a good
That's
strategy, right?
right. It's not going to help you.
Yeah. Okay. So as of right now, we know that Doug Ford. I always mix it up. It's not Rob. Doug Ford. Doug Ford has completely shut down the eviction ability, and I know that's been being going around right now. So, can you tell us a little bit about what that shutdown means and what kind of delay it is for us as landlords and investors?
Okay, so let me calm a few nerves, okay? Because and clarify something.
Okay.
All evictions right now, so as of March 16th, all landlords who've received an order to evict, meaning who they've gone through filing the N4 or whatever application, they've had their hearing date, they've gone to the board, they obtained an order to evict. All the landlords that have in hand an order to evict, they have gone to the sheriff's office, they filed for an enforcement, they have been given a date. If the date is after March 16, those evictions are on hold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so evictions, in hand evictions, are on hold until a future date.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that helps clarify. It
Right.
doesn't mean that every single eviction or all landlords in pursuit of evictions, they're not going to obtain an eviction. It just means after March 16th, only those landlords who have received an eviction order in hand are on hold.
Okay, so I completely agree that nobody should be homeless or worry about shelter in a pandemic. But what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like, is although no one is getting evicted, the steps that you indicated or you talked about, going from filing, serving the N4, and then getting the notice to evict a person, and then the share for the action, all of that still can be done right now then, right?
Absolutely. And that again, like just like Zen mentioned, is that keeps you ahead of the game. And
Yes.
you have to start, even though the board is not operating and hearing and holding in-person hearings, you want
Hmm.
to make sure yet you have your ducks in order, because eventually the board is going to resume. And if you haven't started the paperwork with a funnel of landlords who are going to, run to the board, that hearing date, which is already, 4 to 6 months behind, imagine what's going to happen when the board resumes.
Hmm.
That hearing date of obtaining a hearing date that's 4 to 6 months behind is now going to be 8 months, 9 months. And that's all 8 months of 9 months of lost income.
It's not even about income at this point. It's just, unless in the midst of all this pandemic and you're able to float that property by yourself, plus
That's
whatever
right.
investments or personal property you have, that could be an asset that could be taken away from you. That's a
That's
long
right.
time to go without income, right? It's tough.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So again, tenants, this is not, if you guys are listening, this is not to sound like a jerk. And I've been trying to be reasonable with ours. I'm like, look, this is a situation. And I always tell them, I always have to serve this N4 to you, regardless of what the situation is. It's just so that I can start the process should things go sideways.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if they're not enforcing the evictions that are happening right now, and let's say we are serving the N4s, what do you think, like just a rough estimate based on what you've seen, is the timeline that it could take for anyone to be served any kind of notice to be evicted?
So you can serve a notice. So what you're saying, by the time you start the process,
Yeah.
when the board resumes, when is going to be the end
Yeah.
date?
And I'm not going to hold you to it. This is just to give
Okay.
everyone an idea of, like, how long it could potentially take.
It can take a minimum of 6 months.
Yeah.
It's a very scary time because right now the LTB is on hold.
Yeah.
So the LTB, the Landlord and Tenant Board, hears 60, 70, even 80 matters a day. Okay.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. As of March 16th to today, which been a little over a week,
Hmm.
they have not been able to hear any matters.
Yeah.
So you're already close to 1,000 hearings behind. And that was a minimum of a 4 month wait.
Mm.
Now I'm going to assume about a 6 to 8 month wait.
Yeah, that's a long time ago with income.
It is a very, very long time.
Okay, Beta. So now that we've talked a little bit from the landlord's perspective, this is what I think a lot of my clients who are investors and landlords are hearing from their tenants. They're saying, hey, Mr. Landlord, you guys get a mortgage deferral for your mortgage. Why can't you defer our rent? What would you have to say for that?
Okay, so we can talk about relief options. Can we start talking about relief options?
Yeah, let's, you know what? Let's start talking about relief option first.
Okay.
Okay.
So there are a few relief options because tenants will start asking the landlord what Zen just mentioned. You're getting a mortgage deferral. Why can't you defer my rent?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you, we bypass the rent for this month? Why can't we add the last month's rent to this month?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a big tip. Okay. The lines of communication, especially during these times, have to be flowing.
Yep.
Okay, have to be open. Communication is key because your tenants are going to be coming to you for help. The last thing you want to do is start sending emails, nasty emails, nasty text messages to your tenants regarding the rent, especially
Mm-hmm.
when it's due. Do not do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the rent is due. The tenant does have relief options. So if they do approach the landlord with this request to defer the mortgage payment, there are three options. I'm going to give you three options to explain to your tenant. Okay,
Amazing.
I'll do a countdown. I do from what I do, what the number three to number one. Okay,
So we're going from the best
countdown.
option or the
No,
worst
we're
option?
going to go the other way.
Okay, so we're going to build up to the
We're
best
going to build
option.
up to
Okay,
the
okay, okay.
okay, so number three,
Yeah.
okay, it's going to be a payment plan.
Okay.
Okay, that will be number three. So the countdown begins with the payment plan. The reason why payment plan, although it is a good idea, it is number three on my list,
Mm-hmm.
is because there's really no way to enforce it with an eviction. There's no way to back it with an eviction if the tenant does not pay what the agreed amount in their agreement. And I always, if you're going to put a payment plan together, make sure it's in writing.
Of
Make
course.
sure
Yeah.
you have to provide clarity, especially in these uncertain times. The date that the tenant is going to pay, the amount that the tenant is going to pay, and by which way the tenant is going to pay. Posted a check, e-transfer, how are they going to pay? Okay,
Yeah.
so
Spell it
number
out.
three, payment plan.
Okay.
Okay, number two, actually number one and two is tied. Okay,
Oh, okay. So we're doing three and one and a half and one and a half. Okay. Okay.
okay. Fair enough. So number two is a rent bank. Okay,
Yeah.
the rent bank is exactly what it's called. It's a bank that the tenants can turn to for some rent relief
Mm-hmm.
in these uncertain times, or even in good times when the economy is good, but the tenant has been laid off, or the tenant has been fired, or the tenant falls ill and can't pay the rent. The rent bank is there to help the tenant. A lot of
Yeah.
people have not heard about a rent
Yep.
bank.
Myself
Okay,
included.
yourself included. So a rent bank, again, it helps the tenant. The tenant has to qualify um, for to be approved for a rent bank.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, if you Google the closest rent bank to you, the Toronto Rent Bank program actually provides an interest-free repayable loan to low-income households that are facing evictions or non-payment of rent notices due to short-term financial difficulties.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a very successful program. I don't know why a lot of people don't use this, but again, rent banks, Google them, talk to someone, talk to a representative of a rent bank. They will help you out.
Yeah.
Okay.
What would you say the lead time for someone to get the money for rent from the rent bank is? Because I know there's talks about emergency relief coming from the government as early as the first week of April. Would this be quicker? Would this be shorter? What are we looking at?
So this in a regular time, it takes
Yeah.
about 5 to 7 days. They're
Super
pretty
fast.
quick, super
Okay.
fast.
Yeah.
I'm gonna assume that with these times, they're even quicker. Okay,
Oh,
because
okay.
yeah, because the objective is to keep people in their homes.
Yes.
You don't want sick people roaming the streets. It's
Mm-hmm.
not good for anybody. It's not good for the economy. It's not good for the people who are providing an essential service and they have to be at work. It's not good for
Mm-hmm.
anybody because a
Yeah.
person who's sick and a person who has no money combined, this creates anarchy. This creates, crime rates will go up. You
Hmm.
want to keep children, human rights.
Yeah,
You
for sure.
don't have a right to shelter. So rent banks is 1.5.
One and
Okay.
a half.
So
Okay.
1.5, turn to your rent bank. A
Yeah.
lot of people have not heard about a rent bank, but a rent bank is there to help you.
Okay, so for those of you who can't keep track, I'm going to ask Beta for links of the rent banks, and I'll put them in the show notes or the description below, depending on whether you're listening to this as a podcast or from YouTube. Okay,
Absolutely. I'd be more than happy to send you over a link.
thank you.
Okay, so not a lot of people have this, but it's actually it's a device that you put on your phone. I don't have my phone here, but it looks like this. This is my AirPod
Okay, I
case.
was going to say, I'm like, I don't know if that's what you're paying rent with.
No. I wish, right? Because I like to take pictures with this guy too. But no, but this is my AirPod. But the product out there, it's actually called Square or Foursquare. You have to actually look into it. What it is
Okay, yeah.
it looks something like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? The bottom of it looks like that. So this thing right here, it hooks into your phone. And
Mm-hmm.
when you download the app actually hooks up to your bank account. And at the top over here, as you can see, it has a little slit like that.
Yeah.
And this is the best part. This is what it does. This is the feature of this square thing. It's instant credit card payment. So
Mm-hmm.
for the landlords who are not already doing so, accepting rent through a credit card is a fantastic idea.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely
Brilliant.
brilliant. Yeah.
Isn't that number one?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So, I mean, if you already don't have one, get one because the credit card company, if it's sent to collections, they're more prone to come up with some sort of a payment plan option than the landlord is because the landlord, his option is get them evicted, kick them out. But
Mm-hmm.
the credit card company wants the tenants to use their credit.
Yeah.
So if for those landlords out there, this is a great idea. Look into it. I believe the company out there. Can I say the company name?
Yeah, you could. I know what you're talking about. It's Square. Yeah.
Square. Okay, I
Yeah.
actually thought it was called Foursquare, but Zen is right. It's called Square.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, instant payment of rent, and it's instant right
Yeah.
away. It's just like an e-transfer.
Yeah. Square, if you're listening to this, I could use my first sponsor for this show. Hook it up, okay?
Yes, me too.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Now, I think one of my things, if you're a tenant and you're listening, obviously the credit card interest is going to be higher than that of, say, the rent bank. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. It will be higher,
Yeah.
but then the landlord will not need to pursue an eviction.
Mm.
And you don't have to wait. If the landlord has the device, you don't have to wait 5 to 7 days, if that, for an approval.
Okay. So this just came to mind. Now, if we're practicing social distancing, are we wearing gloves before we swipe the credit card and everything just to kind of prevent some of that?
Well, if Square is actually in time in these modern time, they do have a tap feature.
Oh, okay. All right. Square, if you're innovating, listen, we're giving you
There we
ideas
go.
for your product map. Okay. All
There we
right.
go.
Okay. So those are, I think, all really good options for kind of the tenant to get caught back up, right?
That's
I
right.
think one of the things that you and I can talk about, and from what we've heard, is just clear the air about what this mortgage deferral product is. I'll hand it to you first for kind of your feedback, and I want to give everyone kind of what I've heard so far about the deferral program.
Okay. So the deferral program, again, the deferral program is exactly what it's called. It's a mortgage deferral. It's a
Hmm.
postponement of your mortgage payment to the future date. Now, CMHC will support lenders in allowing a deferral of the mortgage payment for up to 6 months.
Yeah.
So CMHC is doing their part. However, what the landlord has to keep in mind is that deferrals can result in double payments when they become due. So if you want to play around before you call your lender and inquire about a deferral, go to your lender's website. I'm sure pretty much the 6 big lenders now have a mortgage deferral calculator where they will defer a maximum of 5,000 based on what you qualify for. You can see how much interest you'll be paying. And
Hmm.
you'll be surprised to know that figure to borrow 5,000, you're probably going to pay over $9,000 in interest alone.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable how I don't want to bash anybody. I understand the times, but they're basically making a good dollar off of this. I've spoken to a lot of people from my end, and they've also crunched the numbers. The first thing that makes it difficult is one, you have to qualify. So you have to show it. And remember, because they're your banks, they see the money that goes in and out. So unless you're really, really showing that you're in difficult times, they're not going to grant it to you. The other one I've heard, and I think we talked about this earlier, is they're not allowing new mortgages to get deferrals.
That's right. So new mortgages don't qualify if the mortgage is less than 12 months or a year old. They
Exactly.
don't
And
qualify.
if I was the bank, that makes sense too. I wouldn't want to,
Absolutely.
defer payments for a new loan I just sent out. And then lastly, some of the payments that I've heard from are they're really stark too. Like there's no defined answer in how they're calculating it. But all I know is whatever you're skipping, they're adding interest on this. And whether you're doing a double payment or you're doing kind of a compounded interest of that interest added on top, it adds up to a lot of money
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why I mean, the mortgage deferral, it's a great relief, form
if
of
you
relief
need
for
it.
the landlord if you
Yeah.
need.
Yeah. I highly recommend those who don't need it, don't
Genuinely
use it.
need the help.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Okay. So hope that clears up the air for some of you. I know some of you guys out there are really good landlords. What would you say as a good landlord, you want to accommodate a really, really good tenant? What do you recommend?
I mean, as a good landlord, listen to your tenants. I hope your tenants are coming to you. If they are coming to you, I hope they're genuinely coming to you because they need your help and support at this time.
Hmm.
What you should be doing is refer them to the rent bank if you don't have a square. Refer
Yeah.
them to the rent bank. Before you even put a payment plan together, refer them to the rent bank because it could take 5 to 7 days for you to get paid from the rent bank. But
Hmm.
if that tenant doesn't agree or changes his mind or circumstances changes, they don't pay you what they agreed to in the payment plan, then you have to start the proceedings. Start the proceedings either way, whether
Yeah.
you're giving your tenant time to go through to a rent bank or you're giving them time to put a payment plan together. You have to start the legal proceedings right away. It's your right,
Yeah.
okay, as a landlord. Rent is still due, and tenants, please don't hold back your rent. If you hold back your rent, and from my experience in dealing with a lot of tenants who have gone into arrears 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, is that come time to pay it back, you are going to fall on even harder times, and you're going to hit a rock, and you're going to only you know delay the inevitable, which is an eviction, which is what we want to avoid.
Yeah, I think one of the things you hit on that I completely agree is if a lot of people don't understand what a rent bank is, being a landlord and providing that option to them, it's kind of like in sales, you're pre-qualifying your tenant to see if they're doing the correct thing to kind of remediate the kind of situation, right? So, if
Absolutely.
they're doing their part by going to the rent bank, then you could know they're basically not trying to take advantage of you as a landlord and, trying to withhold rent.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have to all mitigate our damages, especially during these times. The objective is to keep the tenant in the home while
Yes.
the landlord has some cash in hand to pay for the expenses, the never-ending, ongoing
Yeah.
expense.
Tenants, this is not to sound horrible, but like I used to be a tenant too. But remember, if the landlord can't keep their property from the bank, you have no home.
That's right.
That's very important. Now that we're kind of talking about good and bad landlords and we're talking about taking advantage, I know there's this hashtag that's going on. I know I prepped you for this and like we can talk about it.
Okay.
We may not talk about it, but if you're comfortable, there's something going around called hashtag keep your rent that's been started by a portion of Toronto that we're not going to name. What do you have to say
Okay,
about
it's
this
a terrible
movement?
idea. Okay, so what's happening with your Keep Your Rent movement for April 1st? So some tenant advocates have come together in the community and they are encouraging other tenants that when April 1st comes around next week, many people have no intention of paying the rent and they're actually telling other renters to do the same due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hmm.
So what they're doing is they're drafting letters to landlords. They're putting posters up in various apartment buildings behind the
Oh yeah,
windows.
I've seen them.
Um, as you may seen them, or you may seen them on social media, and they're basically calling on everyone, all the tenants, to come together to keep your rent for April 1st. Okay, now COVID-19 alone has caused many people to stay in their home as it is, right?
Hmm.
self-isolate themselves, lose their income. A lot of people are experiencing health problems that are not even COVID-19 related. They're going through depression because they're by themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of the elderly, a lot of the middle-aged people, job losses, they're already going through that, right?
Mhm.
And April 1st is shaping up to be a bit of, a bloodbath. A lot of people have had their income pulled from beneath them. So a lot of people cannot afford to pay their rent right now. Hence
Mhm.
why this whole keep your rent April 1st movement is going on. However, this kind of group, you're only prolonging the inevitable, because
Yeah.
eventually the dust is going to settle. Things are going to start getting back to normal. The LTB is going to resume, business as usual. The enforcement office is going to open up, and there's going to be a floodgate of tenants who are going to be evicted. Right. On
Yeah.
top of that, those tenants who are going to be evicted, there's going to be thousands of them who are going to end up on the streets, who are going to end up homeless. This
Yeah.
is, this is, it's a sad reality. Do not hold your rent back for any reason. If you're having difficulty at this time, talk to your landlord.
And
Do
use
not,
one of the three options you provided them already, right?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, both at this time, both the tenants and landlords are calling on the federal and provincial governments to find a solution, because things are going to get out of hand.
Yeah, it's going to that way. And for those of you who have contemplated the keep your rent as a tenant, like one of the things you have to understand, especially if you're in that region of Toronto, you're under rent control. Just think about it. If you hold back your rent and you get evicted, your $1,500 for your 2-bedroom semi-detached in Ronsonville is going to go away. You really
That's
want
right.
to do that. It's not worth it, especially if you don't need it. And
Not at
it's just
all.
not like, don't pick up your pitchfork and go at the landlord. I hope we've provided enough information for both sides on how to navigate the situation, but guys, try
Absolutely.
not to abandon on this. That's just my concern on this.
It's a terrible thing. Landlords are counting on tenants to pay the rent on time so that they can pay the mortgage, they can pay the expenses, they can keep the tenants in the home. Because evictions have been put on hold indefinitely while the pandemic is going on, landlords are concerned that some tenants would take advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
And it's scary because a growing number of tenants are planning to do a rent strike. This is going to be catastrophic for landlords who actually need the money to make their payments.
And then
Please don't
without,
got your rent back.
yeah,
It's
and
not
without
going
those
to work out
payments,
well for you.
no, for sure, exactly. And remember, without those payments, there's no roof over your head. So you got to remember that as well.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Peter, well, we've taken up a lot of your time. Thank you so much for everything, you and Stonegate Legal. What's the best way if someone has any issues from what's happening right now to reach out to you? Facebook, Instagram, email, phone number, TikTok, you can put here. I'll put on the notes for everyone.
All except for TikTok.
Okay, we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
So you can
Okay.
contact us by phone. Our contact number is on the website. So head over to the website, stonegate we are very active on social media. So
Mhm.
Facebook and Instagram. I actually did an hour and a half Facebook and Instagram live Q&A this
Amazing.
morning. So we're going to be doing another one next week. So you can contact us on social media. You can email us, but the best way, again, head over to our website and our contact information is right there. StonegatelegalServices.ca.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you once again, and hope you and the family stay safe, wash hands, and social isolate.